Hey there guys, Spexy here and welcome back to Retrospecs. In today's video, I'll be taking a deep dive into a story of a game with over 20 years in the making. A game which, though technically not retro as it's only just been released, bloody well should be as it's supposed to have originally come out way back in 2005. But as you will see in this video, many things prevented that from happening along the way. So what is the game in question, you ask? Captain Blood, or more specifically Age of Pirates Captain Blood, and definitely not to be confused with the French-developed Air Informatique game also titled Captain Blood, which was released through the Infogrames label on multiple systems including the ST, Amiga, Commodore 64 and Speccy back in 1988. Although, whilst I'm mentioning it, that particular Captain Blood, a sci-fi based adventure, is actually a pretty solid game in itself, seeing you fly an alien spaceship around several planets, talking to the local inhabitants and looking for clones of yourself to, well, let's just say, dispense of. All in all, it's a rather quirky and more than a tad trippy game, to be honest. Just don't expect it to be holding your hand along the way. You do have to figure out what you're doing and the mechanics are a little bit confusing at first. But it's worth giving it a go if you're not familiar with it. Anyway, enough of all that twaddle, let's not get sidetracked here, getting back to the game that we're actually here to talk about. Age of Pirates Captain Blood. Originally under development by Russian game studio Akela under their Sea Dogs subdivision. Akela themselves had been around since 1995 and were the publishers for many Western games being released onto the Russian market, including the Postal series of games for the PC, but are also known for developing their own titles under several of their subdivisions or development teams, which included Sea Dogs. Sea Dogs are responsible for an array of naval and particularly pirate-related games, including, would you believe it, Sea Dogs back in 2000 and its planned sequel Sea Dogs 2, which underwent a fair degree of changes during development and finally saw the light of day as Pirates of the Caribbean, a tie-in game to the first movie in the Disney franchise and released for both the original Xbox and Windows PC back in 2003. In fact, both of these games have something in common, a certain Dmitry Demonovsky, who had been core programmer on Sea Dogs and became the project lead for Pirates of the Caribbean. And it was to be Dmitry, along with Andrei Ivanchenko, who would go on to begin work on Captain Blood, a game to be based on the Raphael Sabatini novels of the same name, featuring the titular character, a certain Mr. Blood, on his swashbuckling adventures upon the high seas of the Spanish Main. And with such a good concept and iconic character to play around with, what could possibly go wrong? Well, this studio had wanted to break away from the pirate theme completely at that time, having already covered it extensively by that point. However, ultimately they decided to bite the bullet, or rather musket shot on this occasion, and sail away with the idea anyway.
Weapon powder.
And in the summer of 2003, work began on the initial Captain Blood project. Alas, later that same year, both Dmitry and Andrei left Sea Dogs to form their own studio, DAT Media, another subdivision of Akela, who would go on to develop Disciples 3, released in 2009. Sadly, DAT Media was closed in 2011, with only the one game to its name, albeit quite an impressive one. As for Captain Blood, well, that got itself a new team, including Renee Nesmetanov and Yuri Rohan, who both worked on Pirates of the Caribbean alongside Dmitry and Andrei. And it didn't take them too long to come up with something playable either, although how much of the programming was started from scratch by them is not entirely known, but an early test build on PC was showcased at the Electronic Computer Traders show in London the very next year and can be seen right here. It loads up to a first-person view of a pirate ship deck, which you are able to walk around by use of the mouse and keyboard, and whilst it all looks fine and dandy, especially for its time, there really isn't much more you can do here, aside from turn the textures on and off, or look at the light source information for the specular wave effects in Akila's own Storm engine, which by the way at the time provided the very best water effects in the entire gaming industry. However, pressing F2 sees us cannonballed into a cutscene, where we literally gatecrash into a Spanish fort of some kind, and are immediately thrown right into the thick of it with swords a-swinging and buckles a-swashing, or something like that. Again, this all looks pretty impressive for a game so early in development back in 2004. Okay, so it suffers from an almost intolerable tank control in absence of decent twin-stick movement, but after a while you get used to that and it does make running around in perfect circles a very easy task. If a little trolly for the game's AI, as this particular manoeuvre totally confuses 17th century Spanish naval troops apparently, and could totally be abused and used to the player's advantage if anyone was to ever sink as low as to do such a thing. What? And after playing this for a short while, battling deeper through the fort courtyard and barracks, the demo ends up on a rooftop, which is where I seem to get stuck, with neither myself or the enemies able to land a blow. But all of this is somewhat impressive for an early test phase of the game, and it was initially penned for a full release the following year in 2005. However, due to the studio taking on more team members, it was decided to split it into two teams: Sea Dogs, who would work on the future titles in that particular franchise, and Sea Wolves, who would ultimately be responsible for the Captain Blood game. Sea Wolves quickly got to work on a rethink and rework of the project, starting again completely from scratch, and after seeing some of the AAA big hitting franchises doing things a little differently at that particular time, decided to move things forward in a more edgy direction. And instead of trying to keep to the realistic look this time, a more stylised approach was adopted. Out were the tank controls, thank fuck for that, and in was a faster, far more fluid combat mechanic. Alongside all of this, things got a little dark, and by dark I mean blood. A lot of blood, not to mention body parts being chopped off left and right willy-nilly. And it isn't so hard to see where some of the inspiration might have come from here. Playing this E3 demo from 2005, you could easily be mistaken for thinking you're watching some God of War gameplay, especially if you squint enough to blot out that ponytail anyway. But inspiration aside, this game is a lot more fun to play than it was before, in my opinion anyway. Probably a tad too gory, and the heads come off far too often to the point that it gets quickly repetitive and thus uninteresting, but still it's a leap forward from what they'd shown in their original demo, and a lot more polished and fluid too. I could have easily seen a game like this doing extremely well at that time on Xbox or PS2. Though more likely Xbox 360, a system literally just around the corner at that point, and which Sea Wolves had already started work to port the game over to. However, here comes hiccup number 2, or is that 3? I can't keep up. Akela signed a deal with PlayLogic that same year, initially set out to be the publishers for the game outside of Russia upon its eventual release, but little did they know then that this was to be the beginning of a new headache for the studio, with disputes over IP ownership and lawsuits to follow later down the line. In 2006, the project got restarted yet again, and although no demo is readily attainable to actually play this version of the game, from the looks of the official trailer here, and excuse the poor video quality, it's the only source material I could find, it actually looks like a step backwards in many ways, especially in terms of the character design and the general look. But maybe that's just me. The project would undergo several changes over the years that followed. No complete slate cleaners this time, but in terms of the general look and engine mechanics, with a few more trailers and promo videos along the way to demonstrate these changes, as you can see here. And then in 2007, after the aforementioned disputes and lawsuits over IP ownership and production rights, the Sea Dogs team was sold to PlayLogic, with the Sea Wolves team being taken over by 1C, Akela's original Russian publishing team. Ongoing disputes between 1C and many of the Sea Wolves team saw the studio number drop from a team of 32 to a mere 18 in a matter of months. The game underwent its final transition in terms of look and gameplay during this time also, and a final trailer was issued, and it all looked well for a somewhat delayed but seemingly assured release in 2009. 2009 came and went, with nothing to show but thin air to the customers, and the whole thing went quiet. For a year at least. Then in 2010, the lawsuit sprung up yet again, this time between PlayLogic and 1C, independently of Akela, fighting over the IP rights, even though the whole shebackle should have apparently been resolved when the team split back in 2007, and quite aside from that, 1C had reportedly already pressed physical Xbox 360 discs of the game ready to be shipped to retailers at this time. Yet again, this of course put a hold on the whole project, although rumours emerged from a new apparently official Captain Blood website at the time that the game would finally be getting its long overdue release in 2011, which of course didn't happen. The Sea Wolves team was totally disbanded in 2011, leaving what they'd created in the hands of the publishers 1C. Both PlayLogic and Akela themselves declared bankruptcy during this time also, and Captain Blood laid as quiet as the stillest waters on the high seas ever since. Until that is, former Akela and 1C graduates Oleg Kaplovsky and Artem Shuko, excuse me if I pronounce those names wrong, founded their very own publishing company, Sneg, in 2020, planning to work on a revival for this long-lost retro title. Managing to buy the rights from the original team that had worked on the project, they put their plan in motion, with much of the new coding being outsourced to Malaysian company General Arcade, who worked to bring the project back to life on modern hardware. A demo was released through GOG in 2024, and now just 1 year later, this long-lost treasure has finally been unearthed and presented to the public in its full form this week on the 6th of May 2025. Whew! Only just over 20 years. Not bad going, guys. But is it any good? Well, that's for you to decide. Obviously the graphics, whilst remaining fairly true to the 2011 version of the game in terms of character and level design, with the main protag Blood here and his sidekick looking more than a little Final Fantasy, or rather Tetsuya Nomura inspired if you ask me. Which is something, I guess. But there are also a few tweaks to the odd texture here and there, a 16:9 aspect ratio for widescreen, and a fair deal of cosmetic flair such as lighting and shader effects added, just to bring this whole thing kicking and screaming into the modern era. And yet, under the surface of it all, it still looks and feels very retro, and that's the whole point of all of this. None of that original charm has been lost, it's just had a little bit of spit and polish applied to make it look shinier. In terms of mechanics, yeah, it's a bit janky, as you'd expect any action game to be from the initial release period set for this game. And that's not particularly a bad thing if you like retro gaming, but I can see how new gamers might not gel with it all that well. And honestly, if all of those issues were to be truly ironed out, then there'd be no point in releasing this game at all in my opinion. It just wouldn't be the same game at that point. For the sake of preservation alone, it's good that this game hasn't just been lost to time like so many others before it. Finally seeing a playable version of Captain Blood in its complete form feels good to me. Of course, as a nearly 20-year-old project and at least 10 years of that overdue from the last previous release date window, I was never going into this expecting a modern masterpiece. That's just not what it's about at all. But if you enjoy a good old retro hack and slash, maybe the likes of old school God of War or Heavenly Sword, then you'll know what to expect with this game. And for the price, I think you might be pleasantly surprised. At least I know I was. And whilst I appreciate there'll be some of you that think this game would have been better left sunk for multiple different reasons, I for one am glad that it has resurfaced. Its journey has been a long and arduous one. Much like Sabatini's pirate captain himself, this game has sailed turbulent waters and faced many perils along its way, and I just thought it was all a story worth telling. I hope that you've enjoyed it. So there it is, Captain Blood, from buried and long forgotten to finally being dug up, flung wide open and allowed to shine in the light of day at last. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I've been Spexy, you've been an absolute treasure, and I look forwards to looking backwards with you again in the next episode. See you soon, bye for now.